Hi everybody, my name is Arik and I want to talk about the Year of the Snake. So I've been doing a lot of research and I've been looking at the different kinds of calendars that we have in our world. And this year is a very good example of how things kind of just get all blended together without really asking or looking at what's going on. I've seen a lot of people on social media wishing people happy Chinese New Year, happy lunar year, and kind of tying that in with wishing them a happy Tibetan New Year as well. But actually, the Tibetan New Year is like way later than the Chinese New Year or the Lunar New Year. And this year, I think, is a really good example to talk about that. If you just look here, we're going into the Year of the Snake. So the Tibetan New Year is actually called Losar. And this year, 2025, it's from February 28th. Like that's when it begins, and it runs until March 2nd. So I want to talk about what does that mean. In the Tibetan calendar, it's 2152. And of course, I'm going to highly suggest if you want to learn more about like the different calendars. I did a class last year for the wood dragon, which actually is, I call it the air dragon, and the elements in the Tibetan calendar and also in the Chinese calendar, they go in cycles of 2. So if you have an air animal one year, you're going to have the air animal the next year. Even though they don't have air in their system, they have what's called wood. But I don't want to talk about that right now. But what I do want to talk about is the differences in the calendars and the cosmology, because I think that's actually really interesting. So the Chinese Zodiac system is based on a combination of 12 terrestrial branches, they call them, and 10 celestial trunks. I'm not an expert on any of that, but it does follow what's called a yin-yang cycle, so that's positive, negative. And what happened was that, I'm just laying it out there so you know, like for those of you who want to know about that, very interesting. If not, you can skip ahead. But that system evolved into a 60-year cycle. Okay, so many years ago, I kind of figured out, I'm not the first one who figured it out, but in my work and studies, because I studied Tibetan astrology and medicine and also Western astrology, and it's very nice because I saw that it was going on the cycles of Jupiter, okay? But I'll talk about that in a second. I want to talk about where the Chinese calendar, the Zodiac system, is coming from, because you'll find that in so many different systems, the calendar and the calculation of time and astrology are linked together. Okay, so the system of the 60-year cycle was first recorded by Emperor Huangdi in 2697 BCE. So initially, the Zodiac, that system of the Zodiac, only had 4 animals: the dragon, the tiger, the bird, and the turtle. And this represented the 4 seasons because they were obvious to see. But then that later expanded into 12 animals, and this system spread into Asia and Tibet, and with like the Tibetan sources were crediting Princess Konjo of the 7th century CE for introducing it, okay? but the Tibetan astrology merged the Chinese animal signs and the Indian planetary calculations, and also the Bon spiritual traditions. So right away, we already know that the Tibetan New Year and the Chinese New Year are different in one thing that's very important to know right away, is that one is spiritual and one is more ethnic, okay? So the Indian astrology, which we know is coming from like the Hindu influences, and I'll talk about that in a second as well, but the Indian astrology influenced Tibet through trade and Buddhist teachings, and this accumulated in the Kalachakra Tantra, the wheel of time. So this system, it integrates astrology, let's see, you can have a look at, like, this is a symbol of it, astrology and cosmology, spiritual practice into 3 different levels. So you have the external Kalachakra. This is the studies of the planetary cycles, time, and cosmic interactions. You have the internal Kalachakra, which is describing the subtle body, the chakras, and the energy channels. And then you have the secret Kalachakra, which is focusing on enlightenment through, like, achieving non-duality, essentially, okay? So the Kalachakra mandala, which we see here, it represents these teachings. So with Tibetan Buddhists using it for astrology, medicine, and spiritual growth, it's like, it's not uncommon to see that. So it's interesting because the Kalachakra system connects the 12-year cycle of Jupiter that I was talking about with both the Chinese and the Tibetan astrology. So we're coming full circle with that. So it makes it a very essential part of their culture and the spiritual traditions. So it's one of the most profound and complex systems of Tibetan Buddhist practice. It's like very high teachings in there, okay? Because it's integrating the inner, the outer, and what's called the secret. Now, I want to just circle back really quick because the wisdom of the Kalachakra, it is originating from Brahmin. And Brahmin transmitted that divine knowledge of the cosmic cycles and time through his descendants and spiritual lineages, okay? So the knowledge then flowed through Brahmin into the Vedic tradition, and it influenced the kings of India. It influenced the sages of India, and they refined it into the Yotish astrology, like this Vedic astrology. And from there, it was absorbed into the Buddhist Tantra and the Kalachakra system. And then that eventually reached the rulers of Shambhala, who preserved it as an esoteric teaching on the wheel of time and prophecy. Now, to really throw a wrench into a lot of people's understanding of things, you need to know that Brahmin was how the people over there knew Abraham, okay? Abraham, the patriarch, was known as Brahmin. So his teachings went from the Middle East, from Israel, modern-day Israel, to the East, and they knew him as Brahmin. So it was essentially his teachings that then were influencing, once again, Hinduism and Buddhism, because we know the Buddhism is coming from the Hinduism. I talk about this in my Chiron Point class, and it's gotten me into a lot of trouble. But if you feel that it's true and you're open-minded, then you feel that it's true, then keep going, okay? So the Kalachakra teachings, they are like, even in the Buddhist traditions, like it says that they're transmitted from the Buddha to the king of Shambhala, who then passed down through the lineage of kings. And then, so this is like, and then it went into Tibet, and it's like this whole thing. Okay, very, very good. So the reason why I'm saying this is because that system, that wheel time system, it's integrating astrology, not only the Jupiter cycle that's linked in also with the Chinese zodiac, but also the lunar and the solar eclipses, your personal astrology, your birth charts, our horoscopes. All of this is calculated based on the Kalachakra calendar, okay? So it's like, yeah, it's a big deal, because even when there's a Kalachakra initiation, like it like usually the Dalai Lama is around, for example, okay? Because it is one of the most powerful empowerments that someone can receive. And even today, it is widely studied and practiced by Tibetan Buddhists. And we in the West, like, we really want to understand what's going on there. Now, of course, I practice with the teachings of Abraham, which has to do with the 22 archetypes. So that's like, you can say that different cultures interpret these archetypes in different ways. I like to go closer to the source so that, we can really work with the raw energies, but that's not everyone's cup of tea, okay? And also, it can be many times that you need to learn the language in order to understand the teachings, and maybe you don't know the language, so then you need to learn the teachings in the language that you can. And then, of course, it's going to be like this game of, no pun intended, but like this, I think, like, what's it called, like telephone, so like, where then like things are changing around. All right, one of my friends, like, there's different names for telephone in different parts of the world. Okay, so whatever. All right, so let's ground this a little bit. So what is the difference? And once again, if you want to know more about the different calendars, please watch my video. I'll put a link in that about the air dragon. I go in there in depth and also kind of break down how the elements are also off. All right, so what's the difference between the Chinese New Year and the Tibetan New Year, aka Losar? Okay, so of course they're both very important holidays, but they're coming from different cultures and different histories. The Chinese New Year is based on the special calendar that is like lunisolar, so it follows the moon and the sun, okay? And also known as Lunar New Year, usually happens in January or February. The zodiac has 12 animals, one for each year, so we know if you're a dragon or a cow or a tiger or a rabbit or whatever. And people generally celebrate with food, family, fireworks. It's about prosperity, and wearing red is good for good luck, okay? But the Tibetan New Year is for the Tibetans who live like in the mountains of Asia. So this is like in Tibet, but also in the northern India, like in the Ladakh region, where a lot of the Tibetans like took refuge because they couldn't like live in China. So it follows a lunar calendar, but it's different than the Chinese one. So, but there's also the 12 animals, but they're mixed with some of the archetypes from the Indian astrology. So it's like a little bit more closer to the teachings of Brahmin, okay? Which we know is coming then from Abraham. But people celebrate by cleansing their homes, making offerings. It has a lot of spiritual significance, and there's dances. I've been to many of these dances before, and you can feel the energy. It's like transforming you. I mean, it's like, man, it's really intense. It's, if your ego is thick, you're gonna pass out, and after a few passing outs, then you're flying high. Okay. So but because the traditions are rooted in Buddhism, and this is a system of spirituality that I have practiced for many years, so I'm quite acquainted with it. I want to talk about this from an astrological point of view because the calendar is astrological. So, so there are a lot of similarities, and I can understand why people get this mixed up, but they are not the same thing, okay? They are not the same thing at all, okay? But they are kind of close to each other. I understand that. So I could talk more about that, but what I want to talk about is, sorry about that, is what I want to talk about is understanding the snake year and the influences that it has. And I want to get into kind of Jupiter's role in there because Jupiter's going to be moving into Cancer. I want to talk about shedding, what that means, about this renewal energy. Also some things that can be done as well. All these kinds of like things we can do with our energy. I want to talk about all the things that the snake also means. So there's a lot to think about here, aside from the history, and also talk about some very important dates and some actions and activities that we should do throughout the year as well. And I also want to talk a little bit more about the energy of air, because still it's like, my God, why is Arik talking about like air all the time? I thought it was the wood snake, but it's it's interesting because we had the air dragon last year, 2024, and now we're in the air snake, and that's halfway to 2030. And it's a, previously, if you were born in 1965, you're an air snake. We had another air snake in 1905, 1845, 1065, and I want to talk about what that all means and what that's all doing, and I have also some movie suggestions. If I get the forecast out somewhere by the time this video's out, you should read about that as well, because the snake is a very deep thinker. It has a lot of wisdom. We know it's one of like the oldest beasts in the book here. It's like because there are different animals. It's interesting because why are there only 12 animals in the Zodiac when there's so many different animals? But it's like with the different cultures. So there is the roots of them, though, are all coming back into the 22 archetypes. So I'm translating the dilution into the essence. In the West, we are familiar with zodiac animals. In the East, that zodiac cycle is based on the ignorance of the animal kingdom, which is in Buddhism, because animals represent ignorance. Now, before Siddhartha achieved enlightenment, he sought to bless all of the animals that helped him on his path to becoming liberated and enlightened. So that's why there are these 12, which means there are these 12 archetypal animals who actually help us to become liberated and then eventually enlightened. So that's why. But the thing is that the animals, all the animals that he called, only 12 of them came. Okay, so you have that on top of it. So what does that mean? Well, that means, even like you have animal totems, so maybe you're trying to connect with an animal totem, but it's not going to connect with you. All right. So we have the 12 animals, so the legend says, or how it was, that visited Siddhartha as he was becoming the Buddha. And they came in a very specific sequence that has to do with the teachings of the Kalachakra. And so this is like, what happened was that then the Buddha like knighted them as they came, all right? So the animals are very rich in their symbolism, okay? And they are giving us a lot of energy because we live in a world of predator and prey. And so the animals are helping us every year to kind of like tap into what's important, what is it that we need to do, and also overcoming specific type of ignorance, okay, which I'm going to talk about in the next lessons. When we attain a peace of mind, even for a minute, it's contributing to the wellness of mankind. So it is our responsibility to clean and heal our environments by organizing our emotions and our mental attitudes. And there's nothing that we can do in the world that's of greater benefit than controlling the beast within us, that beast within each and every one of us, okay? So that is so important. And, that's like it's from training your dog to training your ego. So regardless of how you are engaging with the Zodiac, it's like there is a lot of opportunity there to work with the cycle in conjunction with like all the signs that it means from the cosmos. So now every animal also in the Tibetan calendar has an element, and the elements are kind of coloring how that animal is going to behave during that cycle. And it's not about good or bad, it's just about a little bit giving it like a new kind of vitality, a new kind of energy that is available there. Okay? Very good. So let's talk about the snake. So it's about wisdom, power, transformation. That is really the essence of the snake archetype. It has really, really like deep intelligence. It's not impulsive at all. It moves deliberately. It kind of analyzes situations with a very quiet but like a formidable presence. And it really is embodying sensual refinement. So the senses are open. That means like the super senses are at hand. And so there's like this strategic calculation, and it's one of the most powerful archetypes that we've seen. So it's like there's innate wisdom, intuition. The snake is able to sense things before they happen, and it makes it naturally insightful. It trusts its own judgment, and above all else, it often sees the truth that other people are missing. Okay, so it can see right through things, like no problem at all. It can totally see them. Okay, I would say like also it has a natural elegance and charm. So the snake is able to attract people, and it can remain mysterious, and it has like exquisite taste, like a lot of love for luxury and beauty and comfort. And just like the snake sheds its skin, it has the ability to change and evolve when necessary. So while like it's, you know, while like it can be a little bit exclusive and territorial, but it can change if it needs to. All right. The snake is very calculating, very patient, and always prepared to kind of like turn the tables if it needs to. And even like get a little bit manipulative. If you wrong a snake, a snake doesn't lash out immediately. It's gonna wait for the perfect moment to strike. So this is like cold calculation, vengeance, jealousy, possessiveness, secrecy, distrust. I mean, it's like the guy in that movie, like Sleeping with the Enemy. He was like totally planning his way to get her again. I mean, it was like, wow. So the snake is able to, like, it only trusts itself, you know? It does not share the inner world with others, and it makes it very hard to read a snake. Very, very difficult. And the snakes, they do not like to be uncomfortable. They do not like intolerance or discomfort or struggle. It's not earning that stuff. And I'm going to explain why, because the snake had been punished since the beginning of time. Okay? Now, one of the core lessons of the snake is accepting the karmic cycles. So that's the problem. Because if it doesn't like that, then why would it, want to accept the cycles? But the thing is that we cannot escape our karma, which means that we need to learn to navigate cause and effect with wisdom rather than with vengeance. So, if we are embracing transformation, we can use wisdom and charm and intuition, these are all snake things, to break negative cycles and achieve true enlightenment. If the snake energy within you is clinging to jealousy and deception or vengeance, it's going to remain stuck in karmic loops, repeating patterns of loss, control, and isolation. So here's one of the lessons for the snake year: shedding old karmic baggage, transforming and using the wisdom rather than trying to manipulate, okay? Especially if you're going through a challenge. You cannot manipulate the universe. You need to use the wisdom. This is so important. So important. Now, of course, I also have to mention the snake is sexual energy. It's the Kundalini energy and the desire. The snake is deeply sensual and magnetic and attuned to that kind of sexual energy. It's that Kundalini energy that travels up and down the spine. It's that spiritual force. It's coiled at the base of the spine, and it awakens when you're having like a transformation, a creative process, powerful moment. If you're having good sex, all of these things are there, and it's gonna burn stuff out. It's really intense, actually. But this, it's like if you want to attract attention effortlessly, work with the snake, very good. But if you're gonna do that, there is a catch. The catch is, if you want to attract attention, then you have to be intimate. Okay? Now, even like if you are a famous person and you want to attract attention, you need to then be intimate with the public. That means like you got to show them everything. So anyone that you want to attract, then you need to be intimate. That's why it's like, be careful what you wish for, because you would just want to attract something and then it comes and then you need to be intimate with that, and then it's not that great. The snake is fiercely loyal, but it's unfaithful. It's a paradox. Because it's driven by desire and control and secrecy. That's not such a great feature to have. But, if the snake masters its energy, it can move from manipulation to connection, using its power for spiritual and emotional evolution rather than control. So we want to learn this year how to channel our sexual energy wisely rather than controlling or possessing. It's about awakening your inner power to use attraction as a force of transformation, which I think is great. And before I go on to that, I think it's also really interesting because the snake, the serpent, it brings us so many teachings about the forces of desire, okay? The forces of desire. So the snake represents kind of the other side of things, like the ego, the forces of impurity, of imbalance at times. If you go back to the story of the Garden of Eden where the snake was, the snake is symbolizing the unrestrained desire, particularly for self-gratification and separation from the divine union. So it is the seducer that introduces humanity to duality. Okay, you know how I was talking about non-duality earlier? So the snake seduced us into this state of duality, temptation, the illusion of separation from the divine, okay? But at the same time, it's become like a teacher, okay? So even though the snake is often associated with being evil, it also plays this necessary role in the divine plan because it challenges each and every one of us to create opportunities for growth and elevation, and refinement. So if we are able to overcome the temptations of the snake, we can ascend to higher spiritual levels, which is like we need that opposition in order to do that. So that means that then the snake is very much connected with our barriers, okay, our blockages. And thankfully, Kundalini can actually remove a lot of blockages, but until that happens, our blockages, they conceal our divine light. And yes, our blockages are like these layers of impurity that we have accumulated from anger, or jealousy, greed, self-indulgence, whatever, but they also, even they have their own purpose. And if you think about the snake that sheds the skin, that's what we need to do, is shed these layers of impurity. And you could also say, like, those layers, those skins, those layers of skins, or these layers of impurity, they are also kind of trapping our positive energy, okay? We have this light within us that we need to reveal. So when we overcome the snake, the influences of the snake, we're able to kind of free this light within us, and then we can share it with others as well. And also, if you think about, again, in the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve, it was the snake told them about the tree of knowledge, and this was the forbidden tree, like the tree of knowledge, okay? And that is what created the duality of good and evil. Now, I'm not saying that this is bad, but it has created a tension within us where we have to kind of balance our free will and the spiritual work. So, of course, the ultimate goal is to become reunified with everyone, and that's why Jupiter is beginning the snake year in Gemini, which is connected to the story of Adam and Eve. But then in the middle of this year, it's going to be moving into Cancer, which is going to change things up a little bit. So that's giving us then access to the energy of redemption. So you could say, even though the snake had a big hand in the downfall of our consciousness, of Adam and Eve, the rectification can bring a lot of healing and restoration, and that's also what Cancer is doing. So Jupiter in Cancer is going to be very helpful as we're doing it. So I think it's very helpful to keep this in mind because, yes, the snake is challenging us to overcome our base desires and to align ourselves to the free will at the same time, okay? And even forces that appear negative, we need to remember that they do have a purpose. It's not just like a random thing that's going on, because, I mean, actually, I remember that now. It's like there are teachings where it says that the serpent in the Garden of Eden originally had legs or feet, and after it did that, after it seduced the humans, it had been cursed to crawl on its belly after the sin. And so that means that the serpent was a very powerful being before the fall. And it was having so much power and stature. It did not have to crawl on its belly. It was upright, which means that the energy could flow through. And that's how it had the energy to tempt in the first place. So we don't need to be afraid of the snakes now, okay? But because it was upright and it was erect, really, and it was proud, it misused its erect state. There's a lot of connotations there with that one, okay? So that's like really representing you don't need a lot of imagination to understand what I'm saying, but it's like, it was representing an unrestrained ego and the selfish desire. So the punishment was, now you're going to be like shriveled and crawling on your belly. So if you God forbid that happens, we need to think about that, because this is really a curse, but there is a symbolism for it, because if it lost its legs and it's been forced to crawl on its belly, and I mean, this is really intense teaching, but who knows, I may make this public, or I might, I'm going to put it on the site, but I think it's very interesting because the belly is interpreted as a spiritual and, I'm sorry. The fall is a spiritual and a physical fall. So that symbolism is showing us the reduction of influence. Crawling around on the ground, eating dust, is reflecting the lower state of consciousness. You are confined, sleeping at the coil, at the base, and you're not able to really flow and use the energy as you should. I would think that it also has this connection between being pure and being impure. So by having the erection or the legs removed, the serpent's ability to sustain itself and overpower good things like it did to Adam and Eve is diminished. So we want to use our energy in a good, positive way. Otherwise, we will be depowered. Women as well, men and women, okay? So the legs of the serpent were really representing this ability to infiltrate, to spread impurity. And you see snakes still do this, like snakes in the lawn, like they're sneaking up on you. So it's even though the snake is a cursed animal, it's still, and remember, these are teachings like going back to Abraham, that are not in the Tibetan or Chinese zodiac system. But it serves as a purpose in the divine plan. So the snake will be rectified. It's part of the process that we have to overcome the snake's influence. It's not only, to the fall of humanity, but also to the broader symbolic meaning that must be both resisted and ultimately transformed, like that selfishness. I mean, wow, right? It's really, yeah. So in the tarot card of the Lovers, we have the snake there. I'm going to put more information about that probably in the forecast. But you also have all of the meridians are flowing through the body where the lips are meeting. So you have the transfers of energy when you are kissing someone on the lips, okay? And like all this energy is being passed back and forth as well. All right, so I want to talk just briefly about the air, because I did address a lot of this in last year, because remember the beginning of an element cycle rules over both. But once again, air is a force of movement. It causes things to shift. It's invisible to the naked eye, but we feel the presence of air. Now, it's like there's a lot. Air is essentially about bridging the gap between the material and the intellectual. So the collective elevation is going to be very good or really bad, actually, because it's about understanding and communication and the pursuit of truth. So I think it's going to be a movement towards greater awareness and connection. And of course, because it's the snake, it's a transformation on an intellectual level. Air is about seeking the truth and cutting through the ignorance. This is not a wood snake. This is an air snake. So it's about getting to the truth about things. And I would say the air snake is really showing us, how do we think? How do we move? How do we act? Do we have clarity or not? So the air snake is moving as an unseen force. It's influencing the world not through the brute force, but through intellect, through words, through the unseen. A fire snake is moving upward. It wants the visibility, it wants the dominance, but the air snake moves laterally. It's manipulative, it's connecting things from the background. So what does this look like today for us? It's going to be like the masters of unseen influence. There's so much of that. This is the intellectuals, the negotiators, the thought leaders. They are not emotionally attached, but they operate with a calculated logic. There's going to be a lot of shifts in the entire landscapes through ideas and speech and persuasion rather than direct confrontation, which I think is going to be very interesting. The air snake are masters of communication. Snakes are known for their silence, what I talked about earlier, their calculation and secrecy, but the air snake does not act purely for personal gain. It acts to achieve a greater vision or to shift the perspective about what's going on. So this snake, you guys, is detached but extremely observant. And it is a master of cutting through ignorance, uncovering truth, and revealing the hidden structures. And we see that already now, like with example with Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency. It's very interesting because we see things shifting. We see things changing. We have a new administration in the United States. The air snake is not like other snakes because, and as far as I know, there's really not been anything about the air snake because everyone thinks it's the wood snake. But the air snake, it's going to use speech, literature, and influence rather than like attack. It's going to play the long game. So this is about master strategies, being 5 steps ahead, and seeing how ideas shape reality. We're going to see a lot of articulation and persuasive things, words as weapons rather than strikes, and this observation of everything without being touched by it. So, of course, the air snake weaknesses are it's aloof, it's overthinking instead of acting, and it's too removed from the emotion. So we want to tap into this great intellectual and have a long-term plan for ourselves and see like what is that plan. Because, and keeping in mind that the air snake is not driven by ego or this personal glory. It's about that long game. That long game, and, even like working in the background. Carl Jung was an air snake. He was the architect of the subconscious, the hidden forces, the psychological transformation. He did not seek power. He sought clarity and understanding. And he worked with the archetypes also that we work with. J.K. Rowling, she's an air snake. She built an entire universe that subconsciously influenced the worldview of an entire generation. A master of words, hidden symbols. Very, very interesting, to think about this. So if we apply what we know about the air snake and we see some of the people that represent that, what can we expect? Massive shifts in the intellectual discourse, new ideas that challenge old paradigms, the rise of unseen power structures, forces that move behind the scenes, but they're shaping the global direction. This is definitely going to be a year of speech, especially as Jupiter moves into Cancer, the archetype of speech. So my advice is to really master your power of words and negotiation and perception. Be patient. Play the long game. This is a year for calculated moves, not impulsive actions. And observe how things are connecting rather than focusing on isolated events. Really recognize the hidden forces shaping the reality. Really look at them. Really look at them. So, do not rely on emotional outbursts, and it's gonna be okay. Speaking of J.K. Rowling, okay, I think this is really interesting because parcel tongue. So this is like the snake whisper, speaking the languages of the hidden forces. So we know, if you don't know, Harry Potter, he had the ability to communicate with snakes. So we know Slytherin, wow, very interesting. But was not just a cool magical trick, it actually symbolized his connection to an ancient forgotten wisdom that very few people could access. And so, like the air snake is representing in our system, Harry doesn't rely on the brute force or the emotional outbursts. He listens to the basilisk, okay? He observes. He deciphers the hidden meanings. So Parseltongue is not a language of power, it's a language of understanding. So it allows Harry to speak what others fear so that he can navigate the unseen realms and interact with the forces beyond the human perception. So what does that mean for us? So this means that the air snake moves through life not by dominating, but by communicating in ways other people do not understand. So we want to see through deception, read between the lines and the influences through intellect rather than aggression. So it's like Harry speaking parcel tongue. The air snake is bridging the worlds between logic and intuition, knowledge and secrecy. So the snake talk skill will be, for each and every one of us, learning to speak the hidden language of energy, strategy, perception, understanding how to listen to what is being said, moving through crisis rather than reaction. So we want to really read the unspoken messages of the world, the body language, the hidden motivations, the symbolic communications. What truths have I been ignoring because I didn't understand the language? Okay? Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Okay, I'm going to end this here. I'm going to split this up, and we're going to have another lesson in another video. So you can access it through the site or through some link here.